Before you enjoy this podcast from Ochre, a heads up that there are adult themes and the occasional swear word.
How many times do we hear, I understand the Gypsy and Traveller culture, I've watched Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, and I kind of have to say to them, do you know, that's as real to my life as EastEnders is to yours. And then people go, oh, okay.
Yeah. Have you ever turned on the TV, watched a film, or played a game and thought you saw someone a bit like you on screen? A bit, but not quite. I'm Evelyn Mock, your host of That's Me on Screen, brought to you by Ochre. Join me as I chat with the creators and consumers of TV, film, and games about how you and I are portrayed in the entertainment industry and the impact it has on our lives. We'll talk about the entertainment we grew up with, what's doing it for us now, and the good and bad that's left its mark along the way. In this episode, I'm with Josie O'Driscoll and Claire Rice. Coming up, Peaky Blinders, Caravan Queens, and Tyson and Paris Fury.
I've met Tyson, he's lovely.
Yeah, I know you've met Tyson, but he helps around the house, he helps with the children, he does all of those things that people think we don't do.
Take the rubbish out.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Mock, and welcome to That's Me on Screen, a new show where we kick off with a simple thought. How do we see ourselves on screen in the entertainment we consume, and who do we identify with? Before we start, I would ask you guys to introduce yourselves. So, Josie?
I'm an Irish traveller, and I'm the chief officer of an organisation called GATE Herts, which is Gypsy and Traveller Empowerment in Hertfordshire.
My name is Claire Rice. I'm the project manager over at GATE Herts, and I'm from the Romany Gypsy community.
And Josie, if we start with you, because you're from an Irish traveller community background.
Yes, so I suppose when people think about gypsies and travellers, they kind of think that we're all the one people, which is not the truth. There's a lot of different groups and subgroups under the heading GRT, the acronym that's used for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller. We've all got similarities in that we were nomadic people at one time, but we've got completely different cultures, different religions, different traditions. We've been in this country since the early 19th century, and a lot of us are married into Romany Gypsies. We have our own mother tongues. Irish travellers speak Shelta, Cant or Gammon.
Oh, wow. 3 languages I haven't heard before. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of all the one language, but different variations of it from different parts of Ireland.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting that because I'm from Sweden, so I'm mostly familiar with the Romany traveller community because I grew up in an area in Sweden where it was mostly like immigrant kind of groups living in that area, and one big group was the Romany traveller community, which you're a part of, Claire.
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Romany Gypsies first appeared in the law books in England in the 1500s. So we've been sort of around for that long. We migrated from India originally and worked our way across Europe and across the world. A lot of our traditions have cultural echoes back to India, and we speak a language called Romany or Romanes. So it's very similar to the Roma that are here now, the Eastern European Roma. So the language, there are certain aspects of the language that are similar. However, we have kind of diverted off in those many generations of being here in England.
That's amazing. I get curious now because, so I am Chinese in heritage, but my mom was born and raised in India. So I have a lot of Indian culture in my family and stuff. I'm curious about what type of traditions that you have that echo kind of Indian.
So in India, they have funeral pyres.
Yeah.
So a tradition in Romany culture was when somebody died, we used to burn our dead in the wagon with all of their worldly goods. And we don't do that so much now. We revert to burials. But we do still have the tradition of what's called sitting up. So this is around when there's a death, we'll build a big fire and the family will all sit round for the night before they're buried. And that's actually a cultural echo that goes back to India. Some of our language can be traced back to Sanskrit and is still used in Urdu and Hindu today. So we use a word for water which is called pani. And if you went to India, that word still means water.
Yeah, pani.
Yeah. So there are certain words that can be traced back.
That's amazing. And I wonder because basically, That's Me on Screen. This podcast is about the representation of our community on screen. Mm-hmm. And when I think of the Traveller community, the representations that have been on screen are Esmeralda from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And then we have Brad Pitt, Mickey in Snatch. It feels like, it felt very caricaturish.
That's made for entertainment, those kind of films. Yeah. I couldn't see Gypsies and Travellers represented in any of those. Yeah. Even Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. If you look at Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, I think that programme probably set the Gypsy and Traveller community back 20 years.
Yeah. How many times do we hear, I understand the Gypsy and Traveller culture. I've watched Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. And I kind of have to say to them, do you know, that's as real to my life as EastEnders is to yours. And then people go, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw an episode of that, and I feel like because obviously it's produced by people who aren't travellers, so they focus on the kind of, sensational parts. Because I saw an episode where they were talking about the grab. Oh, yeah. As a type of courtship where a male will go and just grab a woman that he wants to marry. And even in the episode, a lot of the women were like, we don't like that. We don't do that. That's a very uncommon thing. But it was like the focus of the episode. We actually
think that was someone having someone on. We actually think they went, this will be really funny because they won't understand us. So we're just going to create this and then it's going to go viral. Oh. And it's like an in-joke.
Really?
It's not a culture, it's not a practice. It's just something that somebody thought would be really funny to have the country people on. No. And the country people have been had on.
So it's just something somebody made up in the show.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
For the crack.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you'll see that in with our languages. There's been books written on our language, and I've got to say it's a lot of BS.
We often go through them in the office, don't we? We often go through the glossaries that are around, and we're like, I've never heard of this word. What does it even mean? So, yeah. Can I just make a quick point? When you were talking about Brad Pitt?
Yes.
It's quite a serious point. I mean, I know we're going to keep it quite lighthearted, but it is something I really would like to say.
Facilitate.
We ended the black and white minstrels in this country in the 60s. We said that was no longer appropriate for white people to black up and behave and try and present themselves as another culture. However, in Snatch, we allow that to happen to Gypsies and Travellers. Yeah. So I just really wanted to make that point that as good as an actor as Brad Pitt is, and I don't knock him for a second, but we do have our own Irish Traveller, we do have our own Romany actors, and we can present our own culture. Yeah. And should be allowed to do so. There would be an outcry if, somebody, what we used to call blacked up, like they did in the black and white minstrels, went into a show or onto a mainstream film and presented themselves as any other culture, there would be an outcry. Yet there is none over Snatch.
Yeah, and we have some great actors and playwrights. I mean, Rosalie McDonough is a great playwright. We have John Connors, who's in a lot of Irish TV. There is people out there that they could have got for those parts.
Well, to be fair, that's how Gypsies and Travellers have travelled across the world, of both communities. That's how we have travelled across the world. We were the news bringers. Yeah. Back in the day when people didn't travel so much, it was Irish travellers that travelled around Europe and took the news from one town to the other, that took the songs and the traditions. And it was the Romany Gypsies that travelled around England from one farming community to the other that took the news and the traditions and the music and the storytelling. So, it's in our DNA as people. You'll be hard pushed to find any Romany or Traveller that couldn't tell you a story or couldn't cast you a line or sing a song, play an instrument, all of those things.
Is that still a big part of the culture, like a storytelling?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Usually sitting around the fire in the evenings. Yeah. In rural parts of Ireland years ago, a lot of people didn't get into towns or had no way of getting to town. So they did wait, and they were looking forward to the travellers coming to tell them these stories.
Where does it stem from, and the cultural significance of that today?
It's innate in us. Yeah. We never settle. Yeah. We are wanderers. Even if we are what society calls settled at the moment, I live in Brixton and Mortar, as does Josie, but it's never really our home. Yeah. And that's very hard, I guess, for people to understand. A Gypsy or Traveller will struggle to find a home. Their home is where they're at. right there and then.
Yeah, because I was going to ask as well, because you guys both had such strong, lovely reactions, I thought, when I mentioned the stereotypes of Esmeralda and then Brad Pitt in Snatch, which, I mean, I quite like that he had his shirt off a lot.
There's something positive in it.
Yeah, I think we've earned it, but I think we should have a space to kind of hate on Brad Pitt in Snatch.
It's very hard to hate on Brad Pitt.
Very
hard to hate on Brad Pitt. Maybe it's Guy Ritchie rather. But yes, I want you guys to just give me all of what bothered you about that.
I mean, if you knew how many times that image of Brad Pitt with the pork pie hat, with the words,
Do you like dags?
Do you like dags? written underneath it appears on social media under any post related to gypsies or travellers, it would blow your mind.
Really?
So it has been used to abuse.
Yeah.
It's a racist trope now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's how many times they say it. Come, do you want to meet me, ma? Do you like dags?
Yeah.
I mean, you just think, oh, really? And why does he have to be bare knuckle fighting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't understand that
Because that's
either.
the stereotype, isn't it?
It is the stereotype.
Actually, it's probably a stereotype about Irish people as well.
Yeah.
They're drinkers and fighters and...
And forgive me. I mean, you said you were from Chinese heritage. Forgive me, but do you face the same thing? Like, because it's a stereotype, isn't it, that all Chinese or Asian people are like Jackie Chan and great at kung fu or...
See, I used to when I was a kid, but then during the COVID pandemic, we got a lot of abuse on the streets.
Right.
So people would come up and fight. And then during that time, I wish it were true that all Asian people knew kung fu, because then maybe that would deter people from coming up and fighting us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I definitely,
very
when
similar
we were a kid,
racist trope.
Yeah,
you know, they think
definitely.
that all gypsies and travellers are bare knuckle fighters, or I don't know what they think we're doing. But I mean, you can't knock Brad, can you? But
I love the fact that we're like, I mean, Brad is okay, but he was used to play this.
Yeah, he was. He was
Yeah,
used.
he was,
I mean, what he was fed, that's what he believed. I don't know what they taught him or who taught him that accent, but...
Why were caravans such a big thing? and
why were they statics?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Peaky Blinders there's some of it based on Romany Gypsies as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Some of the language in it. And
Tommy Shelby is he's meant to be from the Lee family, which is actually the family that I'm from.
Oh.
Yeah, so he is meant to be a Romany Traveller, isn't he? But I guess actually Peaky Blinders, I mean, it's very violent. But on the one respect, you know, the premise of it is that they were damaged in World War One. So I guess that is at least fair. That's a representation that, you know, Romany Gypsies did serve. And of course they did. And so did travellers. I guess that's one positive aspect. But then you have sort of Polly, who's the mum and the matriarch. And it's all a bit kind of lost.
It feels like they cherry pick, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. But I think Peaky Blinders has some cultural advisors somewhere along the line, because it's not too disrespectful, is it?
They went to the Boswell's family in Lincoln. Benjamin Zephaniah was in there.
Yeah.
He was in Peaky Blinders, yeah. And he taught me that they stayed with the Boswells in Lincoln.
Yeah. But again, I think they should have had Romany actors. Mm-hmm. You don't often see Peaky Blinders being used to berate the communities as you do the image from Snatch.
Yeah.
That is quite often used as a weapon. I don't think perhaps the Romany community gets so much of a bashing by the representation in Peaky Blinders as the Irish travellers do in Snatch. In Peaky Blinders, the Romany community seemed to be wealthier, whereas they were depicted in Snatch as being lower. The caravans were quite poor.
Poverty.
He was
Living in poverty.
Living in poverty, yes. So if you held those two representations up, we go back to, that does feed into this Romany Gypsies are okay, it's the Irish travellers that have come here and caused the problem, which is also a stereotype. That is often used. So it does feed into that. So I think we have to be very careful.
And that is a very good point, because I've always thought that as well. Because the people who make jokes about your community, they're not the ones who have to experience the consequences of those jokes.
Yep.
Because when you make jokes that perpetuate stereotypes, I'm the one who has to face that.
Yeah.
I'm the one who has to deal with what you just said. Yeah.
It's our children that face it in the playground the next morning.
Exactly. It's especially children, because they don't understand better.
Yeah.
And that Big Fat Gypsy wedding did a lot of damage.
It did.
Children were actually physically assaulted in schools.
Physically assaulted?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
In schools. It did have a big backlash on the children. We're adults, we're used to shrugging it off. That's what we do. We shrug it, we put it over our shoulder. But children find it harder to do that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, just the name of the programme, My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, says it all, because they were Irish travellers. They weren't Romany Gypsies at all. A few were Romany Gypsies, but predominantly was Irish travellers, wasn't it? And should it not have been Gypsy and Traveller weddings, they just kind of airbrushed the Traveller part away. While we're talking about media, I mean, I know we're talking predominantly about screen-based media, aren't we? But still, mainstream media as a whole will quite willingly use the racist slurs that are aimed at our communities, which are predominantly Pikey and Gyppo.
Yeah.
You will see them in print. You will hear them, i.e. in the film Snatch. Mm-hmm. And Peaky Blinders, they were used occasionally, not so quite, Pikey not so much because it wasn't common then, but they are used in films.
Yeah.
You will very rarely hear any other racist slur aimed at any other BAME community. And you will certainly never see it in full print. But you will for our communities. And we really, our main campaign, or one of our main campaigns, or certainly mine, is to make those two words as sociably unacceptable as any other racial slur. Because, you know, the word pikey is used by the settled community to insult another member of the settled community. Children in school will say, "Oh, look at you, you're a pikey, you only got your shoes from Asda's." Now, if you're that child from that travelling community, you're sitting in the back of the classroom and you think, they're not, but I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know who is from our heritage. They could be your cashier in Marks and Spencer's. Yeah. They could be your GP or your pharmacist.
Or your blood donor.
Or your blood donor, indeed. And you're using those words and you don't know who you're using them in front of.
You're listening to That's Me on Screen with me, Evelyn Mock. In this episode, I'm with Josie O'Driscoll and Claire Rice. Coming up...
And even the Gypsies and Travellers that are mainstream. I mean, I'm talking old school now. Charlie Chaplin, David Essex.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yul Brynner. They're all from the Gypsy and Traveller heritage.
Really?
Yeah. So we've been there since day dot.
How did you guys see yourselves on screen? Growing up, did you watch a lot of media and did you find that you saw yourself reflected in any way?
Absolutely not. I mean, I don't remember, I'm 50 and I don't remember seeing a Romany Gypsy on the screen. They were often romanticised, you know, in a nice little wagon. The sun was always shining in the corner of the wood and they lived in peace. That's not the true reality of life.
Yeah.
And even today, I would struggle to find a representation of myself. A true representation, or even of my children. Romany Gypsies were in a tent somewhere telling a fortune, or bare knuckle boxing, and what happens to all of those children that don't fit into that stereotype?
Yeah.
If that's the stereotype that they're being fed, what happens if they don't fit into that?
Yeah.
What happens if they're slightly different? Or what happens if they want to fit into that? You know, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just there is no true representation.
Yeah.
We are often romanticised or villainised. We're very rarely factualised.
That is such a good point. I relate to that growing up just as a Chinese girl in Europe, which is predominantly white. All of the representations I saw of myself were also the punchline, or, you know, it was being made fun of.
Yeah.
And then also I'm a bigger girl, I'm a plus size girl.
Yeah.
And when I saw myself in, you know, the American films, the big girl was the sassy best friend, or she was the funny one. And then I realized that's what I made myself, because I'm a comedian now. That's not by just a happening. It's because that was the role that I was like, oh, that's my role.
For me, the first time I ever saw a Traveller represented on screen was in a film called Pavi Lakin. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, she didn't have a shoe on her from the start of the film to the end of the film. I've said, that's not us. That is not us. I know times were hard and there was a lot of poverty and years ago, but we always had a shoe to go on our feet. So that was a negative representation of us. Everything that's put out there, even in Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, where you see the bride falling over, or it's for entertainment. It's not real.
Yeah.
It's not us. I would love to see something on screen that reflects. And I mean, I don't know what people, when they think of Gypsy and Traveller, what happens in their brain. The light bulb kind of comes on and thinks all of those stereotypes. They're fascinated by, but at the end of the day, we're people. We're human beings like everybody else. Definitely.
I think if we saw the positive influence and the positive impact that Gypsies and Travellers have had in the communities they live in over the generations, that would be a different matter. We see often documentaries about the Holocaust. We don't see many about the Roma Holocaust. And people don't know about the Roma Holocaust.
Yeah.
Still today, it's not taught in the history books. It's airbrushed.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have an industrial revolution in Great Britain without the Irish travellers because they dug those canals.
Yeah.
And the Romany Gypsies bred the horses and pulled those barges.
Yeah.
And we're missed in those history lessons. And if our children could see themselves and could find their own representation, they may be more engaged.
The acknowledgement of it.
Yeah.
Because after a certain point, when you hear about yourself from the mainstream, it becomes part of how you self-identify.
Indeed, there are many people that talk about us, but not many that talk to us.
Yes, exactly.
Or with us.
Yes. Do you find that there are any positive representations out there?
I think perhaps if we're just talking about women in general, and yes, I'm a traveller, but I'm a woman as well. I'm a mother. I'm all of those things. And yes, there is representations, I suppose, on screen. I love The Island, Bear Grylls, those kind of programmes, because I see myself in those kind of programmes. I would class myself as a survivor.
And it's kind of like Country File. It's kind of like David Attenborough, because Gypsies and Travellers have a huge connection to the countryside.
Yeah.
You know, we're taught from a very young age, well, this is this side of the tree, this is where it's wet, this is where it's dry, this is how you find this is how you survive, this is what you do with hazelwood. Like all of these kind of things of how to survive in the countryside or even in an urban setting, but how to find food, how to find your way. You know, the moss on the tree, it dictates whether it's east, west and all of those kind of stuff. We find our representation in that way.
Yeah.
So, but as for actually representing our culture, I guess it would be very difficult because what is our culture? We're a group of individuals.
Yeah.
There's a lot about collective, you know, Irish Travellers are this, Romany Gypsies are that. We're just individuals. We're like any other, but we have some underlying traditions and cultures and languages.
Yeah.
It would be great, I think, for the kids to see, you know, Gypsies and Travellers are everywhere. The social workers and the nurses and from our heritage. We're everywhere. We're university lecturers. We're everything. I mean, have you seen a Romany or a Traveller policeman?
No, I can't say I have.
We've seen many cop shows.
Yeah.
In different creeds, colours, religions, but we've never seen a Gypsy or Roma Traveller.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we had a travelling girl in Grange Hill, did we, one time?
We did, I think, but I don't think she played a police officer, or a social worker or any of those types of things, you know. I think the nearest we have are the Dingles on Emmerdale, isn't it? Aren't they meant to be Romany Gypsy? But even they're the fall guys, and that's the nearest in the long-running show. We have casualty. We have a load of established programmes where you could just slot one in. They're there.
Yeah, well, we don't see Gypsies and Travellers in adverts or anything like that.
Yeah, very true.
They're not represented. You know, when people are trying to be representative and trying to include people, Gypsies and Travellers are forgotten about.
Yeah.
And even the Gypsies and Travellers that are mainstream, I mean, I'm talking old school now, Charlie Chaplin, David Essex.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yul Brynner. They're all from the Gypsy and Traveller heritage.
Really?
Yeah. So we've been there since day dot.
That's amazing. So I asked this now. If you had the opportunity to sit down with a television commissioner to speak to them about the representation of travellers, what would you say?
Be honest. come and talk to us, spend some time with us. Don't edit it wrongly. Don't set people up to fall, which has happened in many programmes, hasn't it? I mean, we've heard that people have been paid money to act up and to do things.
Wow.
In recent shows and behave in certain ways. Don't do that. If you want to do a fly in the wall, do it. Come and learn about us. Get in with the organisations, speak to us, attend our events, pay attention.
Allow us to be ourselves.
Yeah, in all our wonderful, colourful forms, whatever they may be. Whether it's someone that's working, dealing in scrap, or whether you're looking at a Roma Gypsy or Traveller police officer, social worker, doctor. We have a uni lecturer that's from our community that's part of our board. We're everywhere. So we could fit into any programme that's on the telly.
Yeah. Yeah, as you say, and a way to reach out to the community as well is to be engaged.
It's always one-dimensional.
Yeah.
It's always a one-dimensional representation. It's the stereotypical reinforcing those stereotypes. But what they don't realise is by reinforcing those stereotypes, Gypsy and Traveller suicide rates are 11% more prevalent than wider society. And that comes from many, many things, but a lot of it is from discrimination.
Wow.
And a lot of it is from
trauma.
Yeah. Gypsies and Travellers are refused access. That's the biggest form of discrimination in this country.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, again, is from stereotypes. And that's reinforced by what people see on the telly.
Yeah.
Because they think Gypsies and Travellers have booked a wedding, then I don't know what they think is going to happen. But there are many weddings cancelled at last minute. If there's a Gypsy or Traveller funeral often in a town, the police will ask that all the pubs are shut. We're just people.
Yeah.
And you can't have this collective attitude. And it's because it's only a one-dimensional representation.
Yeah.
So what do wider society have to form their opinions on if it's not just that one dimension?
Yeah.
Whereas, as I say, if you saw the positive, if they saw the positive influence that they had, and actually that policeman they're calling to refuse to ask them to remove those gypsies or travellers may well be from that community. If they had that thought in mind, if we could challenge that one dimension and just say, we're all of these things and much, much more.
Yeah.
I think people with lived experience, people that understand their own issues, and because people are always telling us what we should do with our lives.
Yes.
We never get a chance to talk about what we want. It's always Gypsy and Travellers should do this, they should do that, they should be here, they should be there.
They need this, they need that.
Yeah. If you want to support us and work alongside us, don't talk to us, talk with us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what your charity is trying to do as well.
Yeah, that's exactly that, yeah. I think what we would say is we try to chip away and change minds and hearts, change attitudes. And that's the only way I think you'll ever change anything. If people could actually see us for who we are, see us as other human beings, and see that we're not much different from them. We may have different traditions, a different culture, but we bleed the same way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about changing minds and hearts, and it's a hard, slow, draining job.
Yeah. To your point, could a media be a great way to changing the perception?
Indeed.
Yeah, because there is some good media out there.
Yeah.
Like we have our own media, like Traveller's Times, and we can be ourselves.
Yeah.
We just did some films with the Samaritans.
We did.
And they've got thousands of views.
I think one of them sitting at 15,000 and it's been out 10 days.
That's great.
About bereavement and suicide.
Yeah.
Actually, John Connors was in that. Mm-hmm. The actor, John Connors, his voice, he did the voiceover on it. So there is some good media out there if it's done properly.
Is there a lot, because nowadays with YouTube and TikTok and social media, are there people from the Traveller community that produce their own content? Yeah.
I mean, I think we have two girls called the Caravan Queens who live in Hertfordshire. They're big on TikTok.
That's what I found with Asian content as well, because for such a long time we were represented in such a terrible way that now most young people consume the content from YouTube or TikTok, from social media, because they find people who speak to them in a truthful, authentic way. Yeah, I wonder, because Tyson Fury is basically one of the biggest profiled people from the Traveller community out there right now. And he's so big in America. They've just completely embraced him. How do you feel about Tyson Fury?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a bad representation for the community. Do you? Personally?
No, he gives the young people hope. I think that,
and he's clean living, and I think his story.
He suffers from depression.
Yes, his personal story of where they said, he'd never fight again, he'd never get up again, and he just was like, dig deep. I mean, I think that is the Gypsy and predominantly Traveller way. Don't put us in a corner and tell us we can't, because we can, and we will. Yeah. So that determination, that stubbiness, and that grit that kind of got him from running again and back in that boxing ring is a good representation to us.
It's from telling him that he couldn't do it. Yeah. That's exactly it.
And I think, positive role models in sport are always a good thing for any community. It gets our boys in the gym. It gets them out of the pub and it gets them in the gym. Yeah. If it gets them running up the road and it gets them with a skipping rope, then so well and be it. And Paris is a good role model too, because, I think that a lot of the outside community think Gypsies and Travellers are run by a patriarchy. I would argue it's a matriarchy enforced by a patriarchy. I would argue that actually the women are in control. It's just we push the men forward at times and, tell them what to say.
Because you're smart.
Yeah.
And for listeners who aren't familiar, Paris Fury is Tyson Fury's wife, and she often gets a lot of media coverage as well.
Most people would think that Gypsies and Travellers women are downtrodden, whereas Paris isn't in the least bit downtrodden. She's...
No, but she's not out there in front of him either, is it?
No, she's not.
She's like, leave him have his say, but at home, when the door closes, it's a different scenario, a different story.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And I think he shows, from the stuff I've seen, I don't know Tyson personally, but from the stuff I've seen on social media and the
I've
telly.
met Tyson, he's lovely.
Yeah, I know you've met Tyson, but... he helps around the house, he helps with the children, he does all of those things that people think we don't do.
Take the rubbish out.
Yeah.
Bring it to the dump.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that.
And I think when you say that he was embraced in America, I've been to America, I've been to a lot of different countries in the world, and people don't care who you are or what you are. Yeah. It's a different... You can go anywhere. That's the way I felt when I was over there. People don't care whether you're a gypsy or who you are.
It's interesting that because in Sweden, I'm very aware that I'm Asian. In the UK, though, I live in London, but I don't think about it in the UK. But in Sweden, I think I'm very aware all the time that I am different.
We're always aware. Josie's got obviously the Irish accent, but we always get that look. That, whenever I introduce myself and, I'm from the Romany Gypsy community, I always get a reaction.
Yeah.
Of some description or another. Well, I don't really understand why, but we do.
Well, Josie and Claire, this has been a lovely chat. I want to thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much to my guests, Josie O'Driscoll and Claire Ice. Now, remember to follow That's Me on Screen wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're interested in contributing, or maybe you heard something in this episode you'd like to discuss further, visit okre.org. That's okre.org. And join the conversation by hashtagging TMOS. Make sure you check out the next episode of That's Me on Screen, where I'll be looking at working class representation in the world of entertainment with Sean Davies and Tamsin Kelly. That's Me on Screen is an Ochre production hosted by me, Evelyn Mock.